Hello and welcome everyone back to another episode of
Not fighting.
I'm Tyler Bishop
I'm Jena Bishop.
and we're trying out just various new setups for the podcast.
Yeah, we're working on some things, trying to get it better. We won't have just a blank white wall.
Or will we?
No, I don't like it.
Well, we'll see about what we have and don't have that's blank. But yeah, I think we've been having a lot of fun kind of putting these together, and we've been moving around the house as we've done it, partially to handle the dog.
Yeah.
One dog. We have two.
Avoid him. Yeah, the puppy.
Yeah. I mean, when did the dog stop being a puppy? I feel like.
I mean, he's not even a year old yet, so calm down.
Well, I feel like she's like no. I feel like it's kind of one of those things where it's like they're always a puppy to you, in the same way that like for your parents you're like always a kid to them.
Yeah. Probably.
I feel like that's some weird. I don't know. Maybe does that happen to other people? It's like just my dad always called me kid.
I mean, he doesn't call you kid.
I mean, he thinks of me as a kid.
Yeah, for sure.
Thinks I don't know nothing about nothing.
It's true. It's true.
But I think it's funny, like one of the things we were talking about before this podcast is like, basically like what can you know and what can you not know without like basically training, like I think that's one of the things that, has kind of been a debate, not just now, but in a long time in jiu-jitsu, and it's basically like, how much can you learn when you're like not in the academy, like during a pandemic, when you can't train or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, there's been a heavy criticism of certain affiliations doing like online like belts and giving out things where and you've never even seen the person, and the like you can get a blue belt by just training online and doing stuff. And for me, that seems just odd because I think that there's a lot you can learn from things that you can like. There's a lot of really good online, I guess, modalities, like things, people who have really good content online to learn jujitsu and learn technique, but you're not really like practically applying it or learning how to apply unless you can like workshop it for real, like sparring with somebody, and then especially giving out like blue belts and stuff online, because I think that's the most critical point. Like when you're a white belt, you need somebody there. You need to be in the academy, like to build a foundation so that you can learn more things. More.
I agree, and I think that there's two layers to that, where there's the layer of learning, like what you're just talking about, and then there's that layer of like evaluation, right?
Yes.
Like of being able to say like this person is or isn't like practically able to apply these techniques.
Yes.
And I think that the former or the latter criticism of like, can you evaluate? I mean, that supersedes like online whatever, because we've known for a long time there's tons of schools out there that start with somebody that's maybe not even a black belt, and they don't do belt promotions till whoever like runs the association comes around, and it's arguable like how effective is that. Yeah. I mean, I've seen it be very effective at times, right?
Yeah, but you have somebody overseeing and like evaluating, even if it's not like a black belt professor, you have somebody that's there evaluating. And I've seen it from both aspects, where it's worked out great and it's worked out terrible. But it's all about like, I guess, the validity of the person that's in charge.
Yeah, and I think it begs a question about like evaluating somebody online, because it basically begs the question of like, how much can you see of somebody of like techniques jiu-jitsu, and then say like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go practice that, and then say I've learned that.
Yeah, I know. Like for like you and I, like we would study a lot online. Well, you would. I don't really like to study that much. That's more of a Tyler thing. But you would do that all the time, and it was probably like purple belt and above, where you were really studying like different techniques and different things, and then you're practicing it, and you're at the academy though, you're still practicing it. You're getting to like kind of like work through like the different reactions that your opponent's gonna get, and like figure out what works and what doesn't. But I know that there was something like you've said this a lot, where it's like in the back of your mind, you're like, am I doing it right? Like, is this actually right? Like, I'm figuring out extra things and details along my journey, like just based on opponents' reactions and things like that. But like you didn't have the validity of somebody saying, "Oh yeah, that's correct," or "Yes, you should do this when they do this," and that until like we moved to a place where you had more people like working those techniques and seeing it, and I think that's what gave you the confidence that like, oh no, I am doing this right.
Yeah.
But also, you were at a level where you're capable of learning, watching somebody, and then learning.
And I think there's this like principle of basically the less you know about something, the more that you think that you know everything there is to know, and the more you know about something, the more that you feel like you don't know anything.
Yes.
And I feel like understanding that, there was times whenever specifically I was learning like the Berimbolo, where I was like, I feel like I'm doing this like right.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you ask me a question like why this grip versus that grip, I'd just be like, I don't know, maybe I like this one, maybe I like that one. It's just personal preference.
Yeah.
And then you have somebody come along, it's like, no, always this one because, and then it's like, boom, done. Like that's all I needed to know. It makes the technique better. And I think without being able to have like somebody break that down for you, because you're learning it on your own, you don't know the difference.
Yeah.
And you maybe haven't really had somebody expose the fact that it doesn't work
that you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Like, you need that, you need somebody to expose your what when you're doing it wrong. That's why I love positional sparring. That's like one of my favorite ways to like drill. It's not fun, but it's effective because you're learning a technique and then you're forced into that same position. So you can like really figure out like what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, how people are going to respond, and then like knowing like your ABCD answers to every little like counter that somebody might have to your move. And so you don't get that by just learning online. Like even if it's, let's say, if you're just learning online, what are the odds that you're like you have 10 different people to train with? You probably don't. You're probably either just drilling with like one person specifically, but a lot of people they think they learn online and then they go to the academy and practice it or ask questions, and we've talked about this before, and it's like what are you trying to do? I don't know.
They're completely out of context.
Yeah, it's very out of context. And so for me, because I've even watched stuff and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try that next time I'm in training, and then you get to training and you're like, wait, I forgot like what they did, and like, hold on, this isn't working, and then like there's several times I'm like, let me go grab my cell phone real quick and like try and drill this and figure it out. But it's like you need that ability to train it and practice it and like drill it with a person and kind of like to learn. Are you really learning if you're not doing something with somebody else?
I mean, at the start of the pandemic, you and I, there's how many different things in the garage where you and I like, oh cool, saw something on Instagram. We've got our phones out and we're trying, and we're like, oh okay. Like after feeling it, it's like there sometimes we'll be like, maybe there's something I'm missing.
You're missing like a detail, or
you're like, oh, the person's gonna have to really do like X to get that if you're gonna want to get this.
And for me, I've learned like just as an instructor, a lot of times one of the best ways for me to teach somebody, for them to understand the move if they're not getting it, is for them to feel it. So I'm like, let me do this to you so you can feel like what my body's doing or positioning, because sometimes you're not putting it in the right words for them to like translate from like mind to body, like that kind of thing. So that's what when I'm like, man, I've tried to explain this in a couple different ways and they're still not getting it. Like, let me do it to you so you can feel it. And then when they feel it, maybe that's when they're like, oh, okay. They get a better understanding of certain things. Or, maybe I didn't say one detail because it's like not relevant to me. It's just like natural movement. So that's how you kind of figure those things out. And so if you're just watching online, like maybe, and that's like and I'm talking about this is your primary source. Like that's kind of what we're talking about. Like this is your primary source of learning jiu-jitsu.
Or even like
or even just YouTube. Like people, like that's even worse, I think, than the online resources, right?
Yeah, and I think it's one of you mentioned something like feeling it and like telling people like, oh, let me just like show you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, whenever you and I would do seminars, or whenever, like I'll rarely teach classes now, but when I do, one of my favorite techniques to teach is a berimbolo, because what I always say, it's like,
you can get everybody to do it.
I can get everybody to do it. It doesn't matter who you are, like what your skill level is. And part of that is, like, the caveat is I have to be your partner, usually.
That's like a big part of it too. Is just having a partner that's gonna like actually do the right things. I mean, teaching kids classes really, really shows you how important it is to have a good partner. And we've all been there where you're drilling with somebody and it's like they're either not fighting, like giving you any resistance, or they're giving you too much resistance. And it's like, okay, but for me to actually learn this, like you're not, like I'm not trying to fight you right now, but I also need you to be a little bit, give me the right look. And so if you don't have a partner that's capable of doing that, like it's going to be really hard to learn too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's not just somebody that's like resisting or not resisting.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, the person has to, it's when they're sitting up from this position.
Yeah.
Or, whatever. And if the partner doesn't even understand the technique, it's going to be very hard for you to like give them the right look. And that's why I'm like, oh, if I'm your partner, because not only will I give you the right look, but as we're in, I'm be like, stop right there. Yes. And now grab my hip, or whatever, And I think that that's the part about learning something new. And that's what I always tell people about learning online. My take on this, and you might have a different idea on it, is that primarily if you're going to learn techniques, like nothing, just specifically techniques online, the stuff that you can actually learn without being in the academy is by watching somebody do something that you already know. Yeah. Already know and already feel like you have a good understanding of.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because that's something that I do even just in normal classes. Like I like to watch like my professors or other professors teach like very basic, like simple jiu-jitsu, and not even just that, but it's like you learn by watching them do something and you're like, oh, like that's like an extra little detail there, like something, you just pick up little things by watching people. So but if you don't have any clue what the move is at all, you've never done a certain technique, then you're not even going to be at a place where you can like see the little details yet, or figure out like the nuance of the move.
Yeah, I think that somebody might be like, well, why would I ever want to learn a move that I already know? That sounds stupid. But in reality, I mean, jiu-jitsu's only got so many like core techniques or moves. There's like a billion variations. But the truth is like, I mean, that's still, even in the academy, the stuff that I feel like is the most valuable to me is like you were saying, it's like if I see somebody that's good, or somebody that has like maybe extra details to something that I already do, that's when I pay the most attention.
Yeah, for
like,
sure.
Let me see, like there's almost like a certain amount of like, let's see if I agree. And then you watch them do something and then explain like, here's why I grabbed the wrist instead of the sleeve here. And you're like, do I care? And then you're like, maybe I don't care about wrist or sleeve. And then they explain it and you're like, oh no, that makes sense. Yeah. I'm gonna start just grabbing the wrist every time. And then your technique improves. And that's the stuff that you can understand because you know exactly how it works. So you can see like those little details that maybe weren't super important to start with for you. You can start adding those and it makes it better, as opposed to a technique you've never seen before. You watch it and next time you go to try to do it, you're like, wait, what? Like this feels weird. Like you have no concept for whether or not it's right or wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're talking about these kind of like learning online, being people who have paid subscriptions to certain, different platforms to like learn techniques from some of the best, because there's a lot of guys out there that have these online platforms that are, the highest level guys showing their best stuff. And so there is a lot to learn from that. And I think you need to have a foundation and you need to have a home base to where you have people that can walk you through the techniques, or it's okay to ask. But one of the things that I think is kind of funny is just, and we've talked about this before a little bit, is like things that are annoying, is like, the people like that are the YouTube warriors and that kind of stuff, because they like learn this move and you see, and of course it's like YouTube, you're posting like fancy stuff because it's like that's what's gonna get you the
Yeah.
clicks and the likes, and so you always, and especially on Instagram too, it's like that's become a new thing. Is like you're posting these techniques on Instagram, and then not, and it's gonna always be, most of the time it's like really flashy or something that seems like, you know, really complicated, and there is a lot of good stuff out there. Not saying that there's not, but I also think that just because you've seen somebody do it, like, doesn't mean they're credible or that it's actually a valid technique. Like, not
Yeah.
even valid, but like
I mean, we've all seen somebody.
good.
Yeah,
like
we've all seen somebody that's like shows a technique online, and then you're like, that person doesn't ever do that. Like,
yes,
it's like
yes,
they don't play spider guard. Why are they showing spider guard stuff?
Yeah.
You know, or whatever. And I think that that's a big part of this. Is you mentioned like having a home base, or honestly, like without having it like espouse like, oh, you need to have an academy and associate, like whatever. You need people that care about you,
yes,
that will like basically give a shit whether or not you're doing something right or wrong.
yes,
Like if I'm doing something, I have training partners right now that like, you know, being other black belts that maybe get choked by me sometimes. If I'm doing something like weird or having trouble even passing their guard, they'll like grab me afterwards and say like, "Hey, I think if you turn your wrist down a little bit here, like you'll get past."
yeah,
You know, and it's
yeah,
like because I have somebody that cares about me. And
Yeah.
the same thing with an instructor. And I think you have to have that to actually get better in jiu-jitsu. Otherwise, I mean, maybe you don't have to have it, but man, are you going to spin your wheels?
You're gonna be, yeah, and I think it's just, you know, it's your progression is gonna be slow. And for me, I guess, I don't know. I'm just somebody that's like, I want to be the most authentic, the most validated, like the, I don't know, just, I don't know what I'm trying to say there, but I want like to know that like I'm legit. And so if I'm not, if I don't have anybody like telling me that, or like no way to prove that, then, and that's been like my whole career in jiu-jitsu is what I'm saying. Like every belt, like I want to know, like I feel like I've earned it. Like I don't want to get it just because it's what I want. It's like I want to know that I have earned that, that I can hang with anybody in the world at my belt level, like that kind of thing. And I don't know that without having that professor with you constantly, like correcting you, guiding you, that you can get to that feel, like have that feeling.
Yeah, and I think that
Maybe you can.
You know, there's a lot of people that I think learn like there's all these different learning styles, and you know, you and I both learn differently.
Yeah.
I think we've maybe talked about that before a little bit, but I think
it's frustrating when we're trying to teach each other because of that.
Well, you learn. You're physically so much better of a learner.
Yes, I have way more physical intelligence than you.
You do, and not only that, like you're special in that you can your progress in jiu-jitsu is accelerated partially because somebody can show you something and then you can pretty much get it right away. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely people that we all know in jiu-jitsu that are the opposite, that they can do a technique for an hour straight and still never like quite get it right.
Yeah, I mean we taught private lessons with people where you spent the whole hour trying to show one thing, and at the end of the lesson you're like, well, I guess that's good enough.
Yeah, you're like, we're close, you know, like
yeah,
maybe
it's like only so much you can
practice on some white belts, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's you know that's where a lot of people might be hoping to be, you know. Maybe they'll tell me that maybe Tyler and Jena will validate the fact that I can learn jiu-jitsu purely. Man, I didn't get any words right there. Maybe I can learn jiu-jitsu purely online. And the truth is, you can learn things online, but to the extent to which you can learn them is really only, I guess the capacity for that is only determined by the amount of time that you can actually spend on the mats too. So,
yeah,
you know, like we were talking about, like you can learn techniques online or pick up details if you've already learned them in the academy. Even philosophy, I think there's certain people that just like eat up jiu-jitsu philosophy, whether it's technique or just, you know, whatever. But I think even that's one of those things that becomes very academic until you actually spend time in the academy, where somebody might be like, oh, you should always pull guard and then wrestle up from the bottom. This is the most whatever, like statistically validated. And it's like, yeah, but not for everybody, not for Lovato or whatever, you know? And that's one of those things where it's like you need to be able to spend time in the academy, to be able to understand like, oh yeah, that's not always true, or that is always true.
Yeah, I think that you definitely, with everything that, like, jujitsu is so, like, readily available for you. It's at your fingertips at all times now. And I think that that's amazing. I think that all of these different, like, online learning resources are really great and they're super valuable. But they don't have value without having your own home base, like your own academy, like a place to train, a people to learn from, and professors to guide you in along the way.
And I think jiu-jitsu is specifically something that is very unacademic, meaning something that you can basically just learn about contextually, like basically through like consuming information as opposed to like actually practicing. And the reason why I say that is because I think that there's this entire generation of people that have either discovered jiu-jitsu or once they have discovered jiu-jitsu, only been exposed to like one vertical of it, meaning like you got into it because you listened to the Joe Rogan podcast, or you got into it because you watched the UFC, and maybe or you got into it because you went to a traditional Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy or something like that, and then you get this idea of like only self-defense is the right way to practice jiu-jitsu, or every other form of jiu-jitsu that's not no-gi is invalid, or whatever it is. And you need to be able to actually practice jiu-jitsu to learn that those things are not necessarily true. But if you only consume information that validates that, you'd be like, oh yeah, like that is true, like you know what I mean?
I think you need the exposure to like all different. I mean, that's one of the things that even goes back to cross training. That's like a big. I think it's a really good thing to make you better because you get exposed to new ideas, new different techniques, different styles. Because most of the time when you're training at academy, everybody's going to have a similar style because it's going to be based off whatever the main instructor's style of jiu-jitsu is. Like, you're going to get a lot of that, right? And that's going to be like your foundation. So you're going to get exposed to that. So it's good to have other, interactions with different people and training with different people from different academies because you get that. And then you can take it back and you can mess up some of your training partners with some new stuff that you got until they figure out your new stuff.
And like it'll help. I think a great example of why you have to be able to like practice jiu-jitsu to complement anything that you are able to learn online or anywhere really, like off the mats, broadly. What is the argument of why heel hooks are not allowed in the gi?
Because you're gonna hurt your knee.
Yeah, I mean won't you hurt your knee no gi too?
Yeah.
So what's the argument gi versus no gi?
That it's harder to pull your leg out.
Right.
It's less slippery.
The pants
make it
more grippy, right? Yeah. But like half the no-gi stuff that's made is made so that it's like more grippy.
I don't know. It's like to make it slippery. Like you want the material to be like.
I mean, people wear spats so that you don't get slippery like legs, right? And then we talked.
But you want to have slippery legs.
Well, we talked a few weeks ago about like actually wearing gi pants in no-gi. It's like allowed and stuff. So it's like that sort of invalidates that argument. But I mean, in my experience, in a gi, having done heel hooks in gis for a long time, it's partially true. It is harder to actually escape, and it's easier to lock somebody's leg when you both have
when you have gi pants on. But I think that this is kind of off topic now, but I think it's kind of a silly idea. I think that the reason that certain techniques, I think that there's a good, like there's good reason for some things to be banned, right? But like heel hooks, it's part of the game, like, and I think the reason that it gets banned is because people don't understand it, and then people are afraid of it, and there's a lot of things that you could probably get hurt just as bad or worse than with other legal moves, things that are legal. I guess IBJJF is what we're talking about primarily, which you can't do heel hooks, gi or no gi with IBJJF, so it doesn't really matter.
I've heard that might change, but
and I think it should, because I think it gives you more opportunities inside of inside of the match, and then also it's like don't be. I tell people all the time when you start getting like to the belts where you're like leg locks are allowed, like people start tapping really quick to stuff because they're afraid of it. It's like just like you're not gonna tap that quickly if somebody grabs your arm because you're used to like people attacking your arm. You're used to defending it.
Yeah.
You're used to those things. You would only do that when you're a white belt and you're like, oh wait, what happened? Or like you're dumb and you've gotten your arm popped because you didn't know, and then you're like, oh, that's not happening again.
Yeah.
So it's like,
and that's my point about the argument around like the pants being like adding this extra layer of danger to the heel hook piece. The gi in that respect adds an extra layer of risk to a lot of moves, arm bars included.
Any of
way
them.
easier to get out of arm bars no gi.
It's way easier to get out of everything no gi, really.
Yeah, truly.
Because you're slippery, and it's like there's not as much. People can't hold you. Like that's why it's a faster paced like game, because you can't just hold somebody as easily as you can with a gi where you just grab onto their lapels and like wrap them up and then nobody's moving anywhere.
Yeah, and so to me that's one of those things where it's like that's the danger of learning off the mats is you can get ingrained with these ideas of something can be done, can't be done, this is the way it has to be done, without any actual like exposure to it. Like if you've never trained heel hooks with the gi pants on or the gi, like how do you know it's actually more dangerous? Like to be honest, it's one of those things where it's like if I get caught in a heel hook in the gi, it's actually easier to deal with because I know I'm done. In no gi, because I've got like I know I can slip out of things, I will push it further thinking like I've got a little wiggle room here. And it's that way with a lot of things.
Yeah, I think so. I think like you really I think having that time on the mat is going to really expose you to the realities of those things. And I think that even your progression in one move, let's say I learned this one thing online and then I don't ever get to drill it or practice it real time, then you're never going to like really understand that move, that technique. You really have to drill, and then you have to learn how to evolve inside of that, because jiu-jitsu is still continuing to evolve. I think things are still similar, but the game changes, the rule set changes, things, people get better, people develop like, okay, we used to do it like this, but there's a little bit better way of doing things now. And so unless you're training consistently and like getting sparring, I mean, that's the best part about jiu-jitsu. So I don't understand why you wouldn't want to just be in a place where you can spar all the time.
Well, I think we're in a position now where it's difficult for a lot of people in just different areas, parts of the United States, to actually get on the mats and train.
It's true.
And when you have a desire for jiu-jitsu, you're like, well, like let me see what I can learn on my own.
Yeah.
And the truth is you can learn a lot and you can pick up things. And I think I've been injured, you've been injured. And those are usually the times whenever you're spending the most amount of time trying to pick things up off the mat.
But you know what sucks about those times? And I'm just going to be, is like, I've done that where I'm like, I still want to be on the mats when I'm injured. I just feel like just being around it makes me like better. So it keeps my mind sharp. But I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Like, I just saw something detail. And then you don't get to train for like, or practice it all. And you forget by the time you even get back to the mats.
Yeah, and if I'm being completely honest, like when I stopped watching, like studying a ton of jiu-jitsu is when I started commentating a lot, because I'm like, I'm commentating this stuff for like 12 hours straight.
Yeah.
And it was always really valuable for me to sit alongside Sean Williams, who's somebody that had been doing jiu-jitsu almost a decade longer than me, and being able to hear his thoughts on exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
But alongside that, when you watch that many matches, like, for me, at that point, and still today, like, if I'm forced to watch that many jiu-jitsu matches, like, you pick things up inherently because you watch, like, the mistakes that people make over and over again. You watch, like, how one guy might capitalize on different things.
Yeah.
And then when you go back to the academy, you see a guy, like, maybe, they put their, post-leg so that their knee goes on the mat from reverse de la Hiva. And you're like, oh man, I watched like 3 different guys get swept from like a come up sweep pretty easily when the guy did that. And then you just are in the academy and you just go to start doing it. You're like, oh, that's actually really easy.
Yeah.
You didn't actually have to drill anything. And so for me, that's actually one of the ways I think you can learn the most is because you can learn from what people do and do well, and also the mistakes that they make.
Yeah, I think that's watching people compete, watching people roll gives you just as good of an understanding of certain things as just getting shown a technique and then having that in your head, because when you watch somebody do it live in sparring and actually pull it off, you kind of can see a little bit the real reaction of what's going to happen, because why it works. Because I think, like, how many times have you been showing a move, you're like showing something and you're like you have to like, you're like getting like, I'm teaching this move and like my partner is not doing the right thing, like, and you have to tell like your like the person your dummy like how to move and how to do it right, and you're like no, and it's really like annoying because you kind of feel like grab the wrist, no, the other wrist, like that kind of thing where it's like, but there's so many things that are that way where it's like I'm showing you a technique that works for this exact look. You know, we're talking about this. I'm not talking about them reacting this way. They have this grip. They're doing this. This is what I do. And so
kids in deep half guard is like the best example to me. Is teaching kids how to play deep half guard is so hard because you have to teach a kid how to basically not fall over when the other kid puts in the deep half guard.
But that's anything. They all flop and fall over like for
adults
any
do it too.
But yeah. Oh, you know what? I was teaching yesterday and I realized very quickly how bad of a mistake I had made. But I was trying to teach the kids how to pummel.
Yeah, that's another one.
One of my helpers, he is a blue belt, and he's like, man, I saw you doing that, and I was like, she's brave, because adults have a hard time with this, and I was like, I don't know, I haven't taught it to adults in a while, just thought, like, this is simple, we're going to do some movements off of this, and then they're just, like, hugging each other, have no concept of, like, why you want to not let people have double unders on you.
Well, you think about, like, if you were to teach somebody their first day of jiu-jitsu, and you were to teach them, like, de la Hiva guard, they'd be like, why am I like my reaction is to like put my leg and like try to lock it around theirs? What if they don't put their right leg forward? What if they just stand square? You
then
know,
we have other things to do.
Yeah, but it's like it's one of those things that it's like you miss all this context, and that's why I think probably the closest thing to getting actual mat experience, if you can't get it for some reason, is to like actually watch, like you said, real people rolling. Competition is good too, but you can actually see, you know, the practical application of stuff, and sometimes you can pick things up that way.
Yeah, but I like watching like you know, like what we talked about injury. Like I really like watching like higher belts roll and just kind of observing and different things, because then you can be like, hey, like I saw you did this, like what, you know, and ask the question, but you have to be there live for them to do that. It's not something that you have an opportunity to do, you know, when you're learning online. Like how many times I'm like in the drilling something and I'm like, okay, but like for me, just yesterday we were doing something and I'm like, okay, but I'm having a hard time, like they're never letting me get this grip. And then our professor was like, oh, like you can do this, and gave me a couple different options of like how he gets to that grip when they're really just defending that one thing. And like, good to know.
And then that's, you know, that's a great example of the types of stuff that it's very hard to learn off the mats, where you're like, well, yeah, I see how this technique works if you can get the lapel between their legs, but that's almost impossible. And then somebody's like, oh no, you just have to crunch up and you bring yourself to the lapel. You don't try to take the lapel all the way around their leg, and then you're like, oh wait, that's way easier. That's simple. But it's like, in your mind, that was almost impossible to do, and then all of a sudden, it's like, no, it's really easy to do.
Easy.
And you have to be shown that, and it's maybe not something you can pick up when you're basically like sitting at home or something.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's why it's called not fighting.
Yes, we're always on the same page.
You almost
always.
Almost always. Yeah. How do you feel about half guard?
I hate it.
Me too. I like
what about butterfly?
Not a fan.
Yeah.
I'm like, can take it or leave it.
Like, It's a good guard, just not for me.
Yeah. I feel about butterfly guard the way that I feel about I was trying to think of a food that I like only sometimes, but just for fun.
Cotton candy.
Yeah, oh my god, I thought cotton candy too. It's so weird. I was like, cotton candy's not great. Like, if you had cotton candy,
I don't know why that came to my head.
It's weird too. I don't know. Summer county fairs. I don't know. Anyways,
know.
But I was like, cotton candy. It's not. That's a weird one. But like, yeah, if you have some, I'll take some. But like, I don't need it. You know.
Yes.
That's how I feel about butterfly guard.
But butterfly guard is like, I actually need to get better at it because it's a lot. It's very practical when you're doing no-gi, but
and cotton candy's not really. I mean, it's. I don't know what it is.
It's just sugar.
Yeah, it's cotton sugar.
What?
What it is? I don't know how to make it. Anyways, we want to thank you for watching our podcast or listening. Yeah, the other option you have. Anyways, yeah, if you have a chance to leave us a review on any of the platforms that you enjoy this from, please do. And anything else, Jenna?
Nah.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.